No, I printed it.
I can follow along.
That happens sometimes.
I like the guy's Worksession look. And that's chicken. That's
Going to work.
yes, but a little different than the.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to leave the bed?
What was it? Sure, last time I
Yeah, I'm usually in bed by my next sleep by. When I wake up at 5:30.
Down here, you know, the late.
Yeah, he's already involved.
It takes a while to when I do work out after work. So
It's close to the end as possible, so you have to see this car.
horses. So what do you do? You got shit. You're putting it in the
The truck trailer had one with bacon and one with apple. Which one you want? They didn't wait down. So it's like, well, this is like bacon.
I'm talking about the one your son had. Yeah, I never, you know, like you had an idea.
I never tried to get hard. How was
Okay, talk about that.
Water.
Yeah.
How are you, sir? I've seen you. You bet.
Appreciate it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, we did have this place, they needed some special treatment, so.
Call the meeting of the Goochland Planning Commission work session to order. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir, we have a forum.
Who's running this meeting? Who's running this? Jamie.
So, Mr. Chair, the intent is that you as chair would kick it off and then we would turn it over to tenants for their presentation.
We had to call over, that we have a quorum, so, you want to try to go? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. We're excited to get the opportunity to talk to you about the village plans that we've been working on, give you an update, kind of give you some ideas of where we're going.
For the record, state all
Good morning.
names.
My name is Chuck Rapp. I am a senior project manager with Timmons Group. I run the planning and landscape architecture practice out of the Charlottesville office. And
I'm Taylor Parker, I'm a planner in the Richmond office.
And we have quite a large other team that I'll talk a little bit about working on this as well. So, tell you a little bit about this evening, give you an overview of what we'll be presenting, give you a little bit about our team, the different folks we have working on this, a little overview towards the project and how we are approaching it, some of our objectives, and talk about how we are trying to structure these plans a little bit differently than the past drafts that you have. Then we'll dive into some specifics on the Courthouse Village and the Centerville small area plan. And that's where we really want to get some feedback from y'all as a commission and get some information as to what you experienced in the past here, some things that may have been missing, or things you want us to look out for, and really give us some guidance as we work through these. And then we'll talk about our timeline and next steps coming forward. With that, attendance group located in Richmond, we have multi-discipline practice. We have engineers, we have planners, we have landscape architects, we have technology folks. We got all different types of staff. And you see on this project, we have my background is in public sector planning for the past 12 years as the planning director in several localities in Central Virginia. Also have experience as a private sector landscape architect. Taylor's background is in planning as well. We've got landscape architects, we've got planners, we've got engineers, we've got a variety of folks that are all kind of contributing to this, trying to keep up with the timeline and this pace of redoing this, getting this completed for y'all in an efficient manner. So talk about our objective here. As I mentioned, we started this back in February, and so really kind of tried to synthesize this down into really what we're trying to do is utilize the efforts that were done and the input that has been given and ideas that were generated over the past 18 months or so with your prior consultant, and then build on that, incorporate some of our own ideas, some from this feedback that we've heard from the community based on what we've read, and also what we will hear from y'all and the board as well, and additional feedback from the community as we work through this. And the goal is really to create a land use guide to help land use decisions as things come forward, as developments are proposed, as you make decisions about infrastructure and other elements here in Houston County. And I will say one of the overarching themes that we certainly noticed as we read through everything, we've been talking with staff, is just this strong desire to preserve community character here, and really make sure that future Goochland represents the unique character of this area. So we'll talk about our timeline. We kicked this off in February 20th. So it's been a pretty accelerated timeline on this. We dove into the courthouse village in March, spent some time down here walking around, taking photos, looking at everything, and really dove into putting together a draft after kind of diving into all the information that was there. We're having regular meetings with staff. And then as soon as we finished that, towards the end of March there, you can actually see that we finished our draft, and then the rest of that afternoon we were down in Centerville walking around, taking photos, doing the same thing there, trying to dive into that. And that's really where we are now. We're about halfway through that initial draft. And then we've got community open houses to share the plan and get some feedback from the community as well. And then public hearings with y'all in May and with the board in June. So I want to take a minute or two just to talk about how these plans should be used, at least in our vision. We'd love to hear from y'all as well as we go through this. And I will say, at any time during this is a work session. If you want to interrupt me, feel free to do so. It doesn't need to be a horribly formal experience. I have spots for questions and things like that as well throughout here, but if you have any questions, feel free to dive in. So the small area plan, typically a 10 to 20-year vision for how you want an area to evolve over time. And it really focuses on the building form, the character of that community that you want to create and or preserve, and especially in an area like the Courthouse Village here where we want to have a lot of preservation and really carry that form forward. Allows you to identify what type of development, where it's going to go, so that you can plan efficiently as a locality for capital improvements and really pace those together. So when we're talking about things like roads and infrastructure and schools, make sure that it keeps pace with any future development. And then, as I mentioned, this is really a guide for future development applications that come before you also commission before the board here in the community to make sure that you have the tools necessary to make a well-informed decision. And then one thing I always like to touch base on when we're talking about a long-range plan, a future land use plan, that this is not a zoning document. This does not change the zoning on a property. The by right zoning on a property stays the same. This is just a guide. It's a vision. It's a future land use hope to help give you that guidance so that it creates some opportunity. But it does not change any zoning, any by right ability on a property as it sits now. So one thing, I'll talk about the structure of our plan. We're going to approach it a little bit differently than the past drafts that the previous consultant did. There's a lot of information that really pertains to Goochland County as a whole, about demographics, about regional context. We want to incorporate that into one introductory chapter that talks about how to use the plans and gives you some orientation to the area. Some information on the demographics, on economics, employment centers, things like that. And I'll show you some examples of that. And then that will tailor into two separate plans for the Courthouse Village and for Centerville Village area. So this is an example of regional context. I think one thing that was really missing in those initial drafts that we saw when we went through it was just kind of orienting the reader to where you are, where these two village areas are within the county, where they are in the larger regional context. So this is an example of some of the mapping that we'll be incorporating, and it just shows, the one here on this side of the screen really just shows relationship to Richmond, to Charlottesville, to the major transportation corridors of 64 running through the northern portion of the county. And then down here on the lower left, we have a map that shows similar orientation as well, but what it really highlights here are the major employers, particularly around the Centerville area. So it really starts to identify there's a little bit of a different character to both of these that we want to approach these with in a different way. So some of the previous methods that the past consultant used was a lot of text. It was very text heavy, really hard to kind of pull out takeaways. And so this is an example of how we would approach showing things like demographics, talking about population, talking about median age, household income, and much more of an infographic approach that's easier for folks to digest. And it really, the information pops out. You're not searching through page after page after page to try and get the takeaway. And one other aspect that I wanted to show here, as the last plan used something called the 15-minute drive time, which is a unique term. I will say in my years of doing this, I have not crossed paths with that before. What we would recommend going back to is census data. And there's also things, well, the Cooper Center and other data similar to that that supplements the years in between censuses, but it's much more standardized, and we can pull data from that we know is kind of tried and true, has been around, and has been tested, versus the 15-minute drive time. It's hard to understand where is that coming from, what does that mean? 15 minutes can be a lot different from different areas. So that's one element that we'll be doing this a little bit differently, just to make sure we have some consistency. The other thing that I think we really want to approach this with is really identifying a consistent structure to these plans. The way the previous drafts read, it just kind of goes and goes and goes, and it's hard to navigate. So we want to go back to traditional chapters of a long-range plan like this. So you have things like transportation. You start out with a vision statement, and that's what we're trying to pull away from a lot of the input and the community feedback from the previous efforts. And then getting into transportation and land use and parks, recreation, and open space, and historical resources. And you will see, it's just a sample draft here. Transportation and land use are definitely the largest sections because there's a heavy connection between transportation and land use with any long-range plan. Where that infrastructure is where you want any type of growth. That's where you want to maximize that infrastructure. So really tying those two things together, and then as well as other things. Within each of these chapters, we also want to have clear takeaways. So that, simple bullet points of what are we trying to achieve in this document, in this vision, so that it's very clear to the reader that they know what the goal is, and you don't have to sift through 20 pages to try and figure out what are we trying to accomplish. We want to develop consistent mapping and graphics, and you start to see that of really repeating that element through each chapter so that you have the same map reappearing and you can quickly orient yourself to what you're looking at. And then at the end of this, we want to really have recommended next steps. So this really serves as a guide and identifies future efforts, future plans, future policies, future improvements that we would recommend that the county pursue when the opportunity presents itself. So I wanted to stop there. That was kind of a high-level overview of just some of the initial stuff before we dive into Courthouse Village and Centerville, and just ask the commission, is this new approach headed in the right direction based on your experience with the last draft and a different approach here?
Yes, much more concise, without as much.
That's the idea, is to really make this easy for folks to read, easy to follow. Really, you shouldn't have to read a novel to figure out what this is. And so it's much more graphic heavy, much more map oriented. If we can convey something simpler, that's the goal.
One thing that we talked with staff and members of the board about is the recommended next steps and how that will be key. Zoning ordinance amendments, overlay district, even looking at a business plan for something like Centerville, where you have your prime economic development area and really fleshing out what do you want that to be, what do you want that to look like and grow into. So there's a lot of tag-on efforts that we can have as recommended steps to really look at how do we measure and benchmark success with that, which I think will be crucial.
But I'll say our goal too is really not to rehash this, start over from the beginning. beginning. I mean, there was a lot of effort put into this through the community, through y'all, through the board, through everybody, and we want to really build on that and acknowledge that work and just try to make sure that we hear it correctly. And we're representing that with what we recommend. So we take a look at Courthouse Village. This is an example of kind of our base map, and you see it's a little different than the ones in the previous plan. The goal here is to really identify major roads, major locations throughout the county so that folks can orient themselves, from the government offices where we are now to, the post office and the courthouse and the different parks and things like that, so that it quickly, you're easily able to orient yourself with different areas as you look at these maps. So this is kind of a base map that we'll build on as we put layers on throughout this. And one thing we did want to note, based on some feedback that we've heard and looking at the transportation plan, infrastructure plans for the county, we are recommending a modification to this boundary right over here. So that we really thought that capturing the frontage along River Road, or along just to the left of right there where the River Road label is, it was a logical boundary right now, and that again aligns with the long-range plans for transportation and infrastructure with the county, and then identify that as an area, rural enhancement area, and then it could be something in the future to look at if needed for expansion of this village. And you'll see as we kind of talk about what we see from a land use perspective, it really kind of starts to balance things out as well.
Is that boundary consistent with what we now consider Courthouse Village?
The previous consultant,
The one that we had even before that?
That area is,
I might defer.
the area labeled as rural enhancement area is currently in the Courthouse Village plan currently. So what's proposed is just to pull it out, so the boundary is coming further back this way, back east.
And the rural enhancement area that's shown is what's in today's comp plan.
Correct.
For that area. So it's not that these guys are proposing it, they're literally saying, not including that in the village, and so it would fall back to what's in it.
That area has land use categories, residential and industrial.
But
they're proposing.
They're proposed to be rural enhancement since there's.
Okay, so it is a proposal.
Correct, because there's nothing in our master transportation plan or our master utility plans that have any projects spelled out for that area. So it's saying that, in the future, if we look for expansion projects or as we grow, that there's an opportunity to look at that area, but there's nothing outlined, like we don't have utilities that go to that area. And one of the core things that we focused on for the villages in our small areas was ensuring that there was utilities, that we had transportation projects lined up, or that we were prepared to do that. So that was one of the discussions that we've had.
When you say utilities, you're primarily talking about water and sewer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There is no water, no public water and sewer there.
Within the TCSD.
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
No, that's courthouse.
That's for
This is
courthouse,
courthouse.
right, for courthouse, and, what we did, we haven't undertaken any modeling for those properties, on the western
What is
fringe.
it, TCSD?
TCS
It's the block.
That's in Centerville.
Correct.
This is all the way to Delltown Road, is that what it's not?
It's just past.
Jackson Shop,
I'm sorry, Jackson, yeah.
yeah.
Amy Street.
Okay, so kind of to maybe share some of our initial ideas and get some feedback from y'all, I wanted to just highlight this. This isn't a defined land use map, it's just kind of showing some general ideas of some of the stuff we saw when we're out here and from what we're seeing from discussions with staff and coming through all the different feedback and documents that we produced. And I'll just kind of walk you through our thoughts, and certainly welcome feedback as we go through it. So obviously there's a historic core area just down the street from here. Really more, in our opinion, more of a 1 to 2 story area to fit the character and the scale appropriately. And that can be done through infill, but we want to make sure that that we honor that existing building fabric that's in there now with any future developments. That's where we kind of think it's that 1 to 2 story historic core, buildings a little closer to the street in that area. To the north, right up here, you have more of your mixed commercial area. I think there's some opportunity for infill there where the grocery store is, and you have a little more of a commercial strip mall type approach to it. So you have a slightly different character than you do in the downtown there. And then you see what kind of kind of a theme that we have is densities. So you have your mixed-use core kind of that's in this area with the historic area, and kind of the opportunities for infill in this commercial area just north of us. And then surrounding that with more of a medium density, then radiating out to lesser densities as you work to the edge of the village. And part of that is based on what's existing out there now and where the opportunities might be, so that you kind of create this consistent transect from more of a mixed-use urban core to lesser densities on the edge. So you see, we're kind of seeing some residential areas of medium density here, kind of that surround the village a bit, and then single-family residential as you radiate out to the edge, the periphery here. And then here you certainly have some public. You have the jail down there, and then opportunities here with the government center and the community college here, opportunities for incorporating additional uses there to activate that space as well. One of the big emphasis that we saw throughout the feedback and the planning efforts is a desire to have more connectivity, more pedestrian accommodations, walkability, trails. I think you have some great opportunities with the streams and the different corridors, the river, to try and connect neighborhoods to different parts throughout this village as well. So that was our initial kind of look at some of this, without getting too far into the details of it all, but so I wanted to kind of just throw that out there and welcome any feedback on that as we go through it.
Can I ask a specific question?
Sure.
Absolutely. The Truett properties, do they exist inside the village concept or outside?
Yes.
They do.
It's a medium density on the right?
It's the single family.
It's the single family.
It's a single family.
Northeastern.
Okay. Thank you.
And what this line here really kind of follows a planned road that's been in the comp plan for quite a while in that general area. And it's not exactly identified where, but that's kind of acknowledged that's a good divide as a road. You kind of transition into a lower density as you get outside of that. So with that, we wanted to just really pose some questions to y'all based on your experience working with the glass consultant and everything that you read through, where there are key elements of the Courthouse Village plan that they had drafted that were missing, that you want us to make sure we acknowledge, we find a way to incorporate into our plan. And then another question would be, how can we make sure that these plans help y'all as a planning commission as a guide for future land use decisions to come before you? What would be the most useful information to have in here? So I guess I'll pause there to see if there's some feedback from y'all on that.
You didn't indicate any, like, multifamily projects, condos, and things like that in this particular.
We did not in this. I mean, we'll get into some of what type of developments would go in the different zones that we create, the different land use categories. But we haven't at this stage yet. No.
The mixed use area, I mean, what did you give us? Single family and what was it? Medium density.
Correct.
That would be where the price range would be in the 300s?
I wouldn't know price range exactly, but if you think about development, so what we will do really, the goal that I would recommend is focusing on development form. And so your single family is your larger lots. Your medium density is where you might get little smaller lots, or maybe even opportunity for a townhome or something like that in there. And then more of your, if it's a multifamily or something like that, or a mixed-use building would be in that mixed-use area, or that mixed-use commercial area where you have the opportunity to get something on a larger scale.
I thought in one of the previous pages were saying that there was some average home prices in the 3s, which...
And so that's just based off of census data, of looking into the area, of up to the last census that was counted in 2020. Yeah.
Chuck, can you go back a slide just so we
Sure.
have the land use map up while we talk through that?
Yep.
So can you elaborate more on the form piece and kind of the regulating principles?
Sure. So some of the stuff that you'll see that we're working on talks about relationship to the road or building heights. It's really, I think, how you want to regulate form, especially in a mixed-use area. As I mentioned, kind of in this historic core area, I think you really want to try and bring buildings a little bit closer to the street. That way you have that storefront walkability, and it really builds on the historic buildings that are there. Then you just have those large gaps. Whereas in your mixed commercial areas here, I think you have you do have that vacant parcel that's kind of at the corner of the grocery store area there. You have some opportunity for some additional uses hopefully to go in there. maybe that could be residential or mixed-use building like that could be of a little bit of a larger scale, set back a little further from the road. When we talk about medium density, as I mentioned, that's more of your smaller lots or developments that might have shared common spaces. And then I think you want to kind of start that transition as you're going from there on out to your larger lots that you have here. I believe the current plan calls for 1 to 2 acre lots in there, the draft that was done. And that it's a good transition out into your rural area beyond that.
Was Reed Marsh, and that's medium density, like to the left of the historic.
Yes.
So that's already there.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was guiding a lot of our.
It goes all the way to the road.
That road, the road that comes through was connected Reed Marsh to Rural Hill? Is that right? The road that's not, that you're saying is not really there, but it's.
Some of it is there, yeah, and we've started mapping that in there. We've got the plans for it, even if it's not all built. We're trying to add that in there to our future maps.
So Rural Hill is to the left, to the single family residential to the left of the medium density there.
Yeah, I think it's right over here.
It's right. So the front part of Rural Hill would be in the medium density.
Right.
And the back, where the transition, there's no sewer, so there's good.
Single family residential.
Right, single family residential. And then the road connections were apart from Rural Hill, and it goes over to basically where almost to the boundary of the rural enhancement area. I can't think of the name of the road right now, Cedar Trail or Cedar?
Cedar Plains.
Cedar Point, maybe that's it. That's our previous, the existing plan rather shows road connections through there. That's how we're going to sort of give alternative access other than everybody being up on river. Rather have some road connections.
And I'll say that's one small difference that I think you'll see with our plans. Is, I mean, if a road is built or it's been approved for the development, then I think we should show it. But I want to stay away from showing really hypothetical subdivision layouts or neighborhood layouts, just because it's confusing to the reader. It may or may not be that way, and we have no idea really. So we're more talking about the form, how do those homes sit on the property really? Is it large setbacks or are they a little tighter together? And what the idea of that kind of urban transect, as I mentioned, where it gets a little bit more dense as you come in, really kind of creates that feeling of arrival to the downtown.
And new opportunity is where Reynolds is.
Exactly. So right around this area is what we're thinking. So where there's been some discussions about potential infill, additional uses on that campus partnership opportunity. So I want to acknowledge that and make sure we pave the way for that to happen in the future. So I might go back to some of those questions just to see if, were there major things that were missing out of the work, the work that was done that you feel like weren't heard from the previous consultant that you want to make sure we hear, I guess? Or feel like we're on the right track with some of this?
We're moving in the right direction.
Right. And then as a planning commission that deals with rezonings and development applications regularly, are there certain things that would be most helpful to y'all when looking at this that you want to see in a land use document?
I think being able to see the roads more clearly in the previous and just seeing the roads, how they interface, and then how that transitions into sidewalk, other forms of transportation.
Yep.
Trail map, if you will, sidewalk, road.
That's good. That's very helpful. And that's one of the things we're trying to do is identify even different trail types. So
Right.
you have paved paths that go along roadways. You have more of your primitive path that is your wooded trail along a stream buffer or something like that. You have your boardwalks in more sensitive areas. Starting to identify where those, how to think about that as you move forward, so that when you have a development comes forward, you understand, pull from this one or pull from this one. You kind of have that roadmap to success there to make sure that you have the pieces to think about. And then one thing we're looking at, great suggestion by staff, was to start to identify the different forms. So if you have, a large-scale single-family home lot, what zone does that go in? If you have, a cluster home or a quarter-acre lot, where does that go? If you have a townhouse, where does that go? If you have something different, so we're kind of identifying the different residential types as well, and which zones those might fit in best, and how they relate to your zoning as well.
Well, I think you had labeled in the map that medium density would consider different types of family homes.
Yep. I think that's the most appropriate area where you're in a close proximity, walking area
Right.
to those kind of, near centers, commercial centers and the historic downtown.
Makes sense.
Okay, great. If we're good with that, dive into Centerville. Similar approach here, this is just our base map again, really trying to identify the major corridors, 64, Broad Street down the center. Again, this has some great opportunities for greenways and things like that with the existing streams that run through the different areas here. There's a lot of infrastructure already there, and so this plan is a little more robust, I think it will be. And some great opportunities here, slightly different focus.
Can you identify a little closer the borders on the southern part of the county there? Centerville, to the bottom, the roads are,
Down here.
yeah, what is exactly is that?
So this is Hockett Road.
Okay.
Down here, I might,
How far does that come down?
top of my head, I
What's
think.
that?
Yeah.
Bottom of
Right.
So the boundary has not changed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't.
You're not making changes to
Oh,
the
I-
Centerville,
okay.
boundaries.
One thing we are doing though is acknowledging that this area down here should really be maybe a future study area based on some activity and some interest that y'all had there. To think about that as analysis in the future. So again, we're trying to really identify what's there now, build on that, as well as some of the planning that's been done here with the county and developments that are already proposed or improved, and trying to work around that here and incorporate that into this vision. So, there's one thing I'll say here. So you have Broad Street that obviously bisects this. It's a major corridor. A lot of traffic. It is what it is. It does bisect the area. It's going to be hard to connect both sides of that. But they both sides do have a commercial feel, so we want to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge that they're a little bit different. And so we're calling here kind of this mixed-use core, fills this whole area, and the center there is where you have the existing shopping center and radiate from there, and maybe some opportunities to incorporate some additional uses to support that commercial that's there, and really kind of create that central area. On the opposite side, that's what we call the transitional mixed use, because we want to really honor that transition to a lot of the residential that's to the south of it. And so that you start to think about, as you work back from Broad Street, this transition component to a medium density and then to a single family density a little lower. And really medium density, a lot of it is due to the density that's out there right now. It's already been platted, it already kind of fits that character. Recognizing that there's some opportunities at the interchanges for your kind of commercial and mixed use areas as well there for a little more intensity on those interchanges and capitalize on that. A lot of it's already there as well, so one would acknowledge that, and then as well as the county's plans for improving this corridor right here. Then there's some large parcels for economic development that the county's acknowledged over the years, and we want to make sure we honor that as well and create that opportunity there. And then again, it's kind of a nice transition as you work from this higher intensity over to a single family with the medium density in between that can then also feed into the mixed use core. So in this one, again, like I said, there's a great emphasis again on connectivity, pedestrian access. I think you have some neat opportunities with the existing streams that are there to connect neighborhoods into this kind of central core. Maybe some opportunities for some public spaces in that existing shopping center, something to kind of create a community center type feel to it as well. So that is really where we are on this one as well. I kind of have similar questions on that one. If there were things that were maybe missing from the previous efforts that you want to make sure we focus on with this one, as well as things that help y'all with decision making in the future in this area. So I can go back to that just so you have it. Turn it over to y'all for comments or questions.
Where is the county with the eastern, north and south? What's the trail along Tucko Creek?
The East End Trail. That project's moving forward. We're working on picking the alignment strategy and then determining what we need to do as far as easements. But the
Are you
county
still
will be.
acquiring private easements?
Yes, it will. And the county will be administering that directly.
Right. So I think that would be a key thing. That's going to be a nice feature of the county is that eastern trail that runs north south from Broad all the way through to Patterson along Tuckahoe Creek.
With the current funding, the full connectivity will be challenged. As you know, we did return a good portion of the funding to VDOT due to conditions that were imposed based on the administration requirements that VDOT has, so we are locally funding. So I think that's why the alignment selection is key, and trying to make sense of, you know, for instance, are you connecting Hardywood to the nearest development? And we can always add on in future phases.
Right.
So more than likely, it will become a phased project rather than an all-in full connectivity.
If we could show that, I think that would be a benefit. There's not a park in that village per se.
Absolutely.
Plans for a park, but a feature like that, I think that'd be
We really
a
are
good show.
really trying to get a piece of it built now, segment
Yep.
built, so we can create some inertia.
Right.
It's been a challenge
Yep.
identifying funding, create that inertia, get this first segment done.
Oh, yeah.
And we can create some inertia, continue.
Also, I think that's great to hear. Just one of the things we were actually talking about just the other day as to, we noticed that there isn't really a public park here at all, whereas there is some public parks here at Courthouse. So as this, especially with the, this being a little bit more intensive, certainly want to make sure we identify those opportunities so that maybe when a development comes forward and you see an opportunity for utilizing a floodplain or something like that.
I can see the trail being a popular amenity for those in the county and those that are patronizing the
Definitely.
Hardywood and other places.
Did you take into consideration the project that have already been approved?
We did. And so that has something to do with the general shapes of things that we're looking at and where we're drawing boundaries so that maybe we can use those as catalysts to make more form like that if it's desirable, for sure. Some areas have an existing development, maybe that doesn't fit perfectly, and we just kind of need to work around that for consistency. But yeah, we're certainly trying to build on what was approved and we've been drawing that in as well. One of the big things, you know, we were out there walking around the shopping center in that mixed-use core area, trying to figure out, you know, how do we activate it internally a little bit, so it's less of just a destination for a car, and maybe want to create some pedestrian access internally as well, and then some kind of, as we mentioned, a park or a small plaza feature or something like that would be a great opportunity as it continues to fill in. So that maybe we can create a little more than just a shopping center type of feel to it. I think there's some opportunities for streetscape improvements as well on Broad Street to try and make that a little more comfortable. Just with the volume of traffic on it, it's a lot. So trying to kind of, and I think it's also creates some opportunities to incorporate some of the elements to reflect the community character there as well, what you might incorporate from a streetscape perspective.
Do you recommend slower speeds on Broad Street?
I mean, I think, like I said, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's
Four
there to move
lanes.
traffic, it's 4 lanes, but I do think you can separate the sidewalk from the street a little bit as developments come in and create that buffer, the street trees in between, maybe some ideas for fencing or something like that to kind of create a little bit more of a pastoral feel.
Yeah.
Where you have some openings to preserve some view sheds,
It'd be nice.
just to make it a little more comfortable to walk along. And then I know like a lot of the stores front on that, it might be great if you could also get a rear frontage into the parking lot, so that you can kind of activate both sides,
Yeah.
those parcels as well.
Correct. Like a parking behind it.
Exactly, you have some through roads there that run either way, but they don't have sidewalks right now, so it'd be great to try and get some sidewalks on there, so then you can kind of walk there, you might not have to walk along Broad Street if you wanted to walk from restaurant to restaurant or shop to shop or something like that.
There's not much availability of walking. Sidewalks so close.
None, yeah, we walked around.
Nothing to walk down.
Exactly, so that was a big focus of us, is how can we kind of start to create that sense of place there with that, so it's not just getting your car or drive.
I was gonna say, we have the sidewalks there, especially in particular in the eastern side on the other side of 288, they're right up in traffic. And it's just, who would wanna walk that, to go to another places, those are ones for absolute necessity that you're gonna walk it. Otherwise, it's very uncomfortable being that close to traffic, so that's gonna be an important element. I think that's something we talked about before, and also ways that we can cross the Broad, so.
Is that bottom line on Tuckahoe Creek Parkway, single family residence? And then that little blue thing is Finline?
Which
About
where?
future study area?
Talking
The
right
view-
down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a little north of
Yeah.
there. That actually is the area. So Reader's Branch is the right bottom of the medium density, and that Gilman property we did last year. So what's below that is part of West Creek.
Currently.
I think it'd be good to show some of the existing, maybe not on this map, but
Yeah.
under all of the existing development that's there, and then the big proposed one. I'll put it on the north side of the road,
Yep. You have the one,
not a development.
one right up there. Yep.
That can be a little, send sort of a mixed message, because this is supposed to be a vision that doesn't, take it over the next 20 years, that isn't limited by what's there, even though it may take it into account. And then it seems to people like it's more of a zone, oh, you're showing me this neighborhood that's there, that looks more like a zoning document. So there's a reason why it's, while loosely following some things that are there, it doesn't actually show developments. But I think when the map that's in with the streets labeled and so forth, it's
Yeah.
easier to follow along.
So you will be able to see this, and so we'll have things overlaid on these for greenways or for roads and things like that, identifying which roads are, arterials or collectors or local roads, and kind of starting to see this layering take place on top of this map, which should hopefully read pretty well. And then we've got to bring that all together with the future land use map.
Yeah, kind of a melding of the two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how, and those things should all inform that future
Yeah,
land use
because
map.
trying to figure spatially where exactly,
Exactly.
neighborhoods are and roads are.
And so maybe that was one of the things that I really struggled with the previous consultants' plans, that didn't really take you on that journey of that thought process of how they arrived at the future land use map, of overlaying the different study areas that you're looking at and different topics to then inform a land use decision. And like I said, a lot of this really revolves around transportation. I mean, that's a big key, transportation land use. It's critical to how this works. So you can even kind of see, I mean, there's some great backbones here, some streams and things like that that just run right through, which, as you're talking about, and then you have one running through the neighborhoods here. It provides some great opportunities for alternative transportation as well, and recreation access. So, yeah, I mean, that's really what we had tonight. I wanted to kind of touch base on our timeline as well, so just kind of reiterate with that where we are. So we are started in February, had our kickoff. We had some meetings with board members in March, started working on the Courthouse Village plan. Now we're into the thick of the Centerville, and you'll notice I'm calling it the Centerville Small Area Plan. I do think they're different. Courthouse is more of a village. Centerville, you got two major interchanges there. It's more of a small area plan in my mind. And you have a lot of economic development potential and things like that out there, so it's slightly different than a village. And so we're working through that right now. We'll have some additional discussions with board members a little bit later this month. And then coming back in May, we'll have open houses with the community, one for each plan. The way we really allow people to digest it separately. And those who are interested in different areas come out and speak with us, view the plans, give us feedback, and we'll come back to y'all for public hearings, and then the board for public hearings as well. And hopefully we can get on a path to adoption.
Has the county had requests for a park in the eastern end of the county?
It's one of the tops on the,
I would guess.
the community surveys we did, open space parks.
Right.
Parks, access to
Services.
services, community spaces, yes.
I guess I'm not sure if library.
Library.
This specific area would be the best place for a park. It's prime economic development. Maybe just outside of that would be nice to have a park that would be kind of in that same vision.
And we're actively looking at opportunities and spaces of where something like that would fit, and it would not take away from that prime space for business investment.
It's interrelated, because the one trying to create some place for business to come. Sometimes it's public spaces contribute to that.
Right.
And those top tier employers want amenities. And so, it all kind of interplays together. Just have to figure out how to make that work.
Connect to that blue trail.
Little boardwalk.
Yeah, and I think by acknowledging that in these documents, even if it's not an exact location, we don't have it all planned out, by acknowledging the need for it and having that adopted by the county, then when developments or opportunities come, you have that to fall back on as something, a vision that you desire.
In particular, when you have a village type set or the sort of the mixed use type of setting, you have the opportunity that you can have public space that comes along with that type of development, so it feels like it's part of it.
Right.
And, some of it could be true public, as in, the way it goes to the county, but a lot of it is the private development can provide those type of gathering spaces and the like with them that draws the customers and draws the citizens to move there. So I think Centerville is really prime for that. But there is so much, I would say, wetlands and green space and stuff that has
It's a great
opportunities.
opportunity.
Right.
That we could probably look to shared land or far, get opportunities to get some opportunities to do that. That's north of Broad Street.
Yeah.
As well, so.
The boundaries of kind of these different areas, and that's traditional, where the economic development areas, the floodplain runs right along that would be a great opportunity for the business
Great.
/ amenity.
For corporate partnership.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we want to look at and explore when we talk about a business plan. That's something we've also had a lot of discussions with Tim Davey, with Timmons as well, on looking at blending that economic development side and land use side for then, what are target industries, what are things that look and fit and feel Goochland for our prime corridor of those 1,000 acres along Ashland Road, and how can that grow and mature over time that's complementary to who we are, and also, provide a vitality to us, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
That's a big challenge. Everybody talks about keeping Goochland rural, but they can't define what that really is.
They can-
85, 15%, they can't really define what that looks like.
That's one thing we've talked about trying to highlight, and also looking at that preservation piece for the outlying areas to ensure that we don't have the unintentional bleed or sprawl over. So how we really highlight our preservation value, because you do have to have the growth area to also have the sustainability and the vitality. And again, this is where we have our utilities, it's where we have the majority of amenities, your grocery stores, your other things. So how you highlight that, and that will be one of the things we're focusing on for our introduction. Tom's been working, Tom Coleman, with Chuck and team on that introduction heavily.
Is there any thought to offering incentives for developers to put certain things along Broad Street as opposed to what they normally would? The north side of Broad is for the shopping center. I mean, all that property is pretty commercial, pretty built out. There's nothing you'd really walk to. It's all hamburgers or tacos or spark plugs or fireplaces. So there's nothing else really there. But the other side, like there's a piece of property on the other side that's now for sale. It goes back, give them an incentive not to necessarily put residential there, but put some kind of nice commercial restaurant or small businesses in there. Give a tax break or something.
Yeah, there are programs out there if the Commissioner's Board wants to bring forward one day is to do incentivize certain types of businesses. I know there used to be one in Virginia Beach, the Vibe District, that did the encouraging small local restaurants sort of type of things that have, not chain and stuff, so you sort of create a sense of place. I think we haven't seen, of course, what their proposal is. I anticipate a lot of focus on design, sense of place that encourages those areas, especially in that core, both sides of the street, to sort of have that walkable feel and closeness, and discourage, at least discourage more big box or things that relate to that. And through your design standards, you sort of encourage certain types of uses.
Process-wise, though, this document would not be a place where you would discuss incentives.
Right.
So that's something as far as implementation steps in the future. The plans are important, but that's why they're going to provide some other additional implementation steps. That's really where you make the plan come to life. And I'm sure it's going to be some work for each of us around this table in the future. for that. But I think that's gonna be important because in implementation stuff, people really get to see things done and you get to make sure the vision's carried forward, and they've already had some good recommendations in that area. And I think we'd also like to hear from the commission as we go forward. Are we missing something in implementation steps? You know, what else do you think would make this sort of pop? How do we get these things off the ground?
I think one of the things that the previous group presented in their one land planning is how much money is spent locally versus spent short on how many dollars we usually to be spent elsewhere. Facing, trying to keep the money local, and I think that would be something good. It's more like not a vision, but I think it's something we should strive to spend as much money locally as we can, with our services, that those of us that live here, work here, spend as much as we can in the community, because it improves the community. So.
For roads or people that buy gas and Goochland.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
Gas and Goochland. Buy gas
Gas
and
and
Goochland.
Goochland, supports local transportation dollars.
We need every nickel we can get, so.
Lots of places to explore Goochland, from what I've been reading lately.
That's true.
Economic development.
Yeah, just summarize too. A lot of the stuff, as was said, we'll focus on a lot of the design or the character that you might want, and then we might identify potential ordinance revisions we would recommend you explore. Or, I noticed in the previous consultant plan there are a lot of overlays on the land use map. Overlays are really a zoning ordinance tool, and they really need to be part of the zoning ordinance. This is a guide; it's not a regulated document. So those come as a next step. So and what we're trying to do is identify multiple options, so y'all can kind of pick and choose what fits at the right time for y'all.
Thank you.
Any other comments or direction for us? Certainly appreciate
What was
it.
good so far? I just said, looks good so far.
What, in addition to what you shared with us this evening, which is a very high level vision, what do you anticipate having in addition to this prior to community open houses?
The community open houses are pretty much our drop dead date just to get it done. So we're, like I said, we've got a large team cranking on this.
Right.
Yeah, and so
It's going to be significantly more than what we're seeing this evening.
it will be. So that would really, unfortunately, be the first, just with the pace we're on and the timeline, trying to get this in as quickly as possible for y'all.
Right.
We plan to have the plans publicly posted a minimum of 4 to 5 days prior to the community open house.
Yep.
So ideally, they would be going up the Thursday, Friday before online, so they can be socialized, so folks can come to community open house, have an opportunity to have read what is out there and ask questions. Again, it's more of a question and an overview of the plans. And I think what might really be helpful, even though we talked about it in the packet, is maybe going through the diagnostic review and just really highlighting the fact of what you guys assessed, just to get where we are now. Because even though it's a compressed timeframe, one thing I do want to emphasize is that really the only change is the consultant piece. We are where we should be in the process as far as 12 to 14 months of community input and working to then synthesize that into a document that then can be presented in a cohesive fashion for governing bodies to review, such as yourselves as Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. But they spent extensive time reviewing all of the video footage from the community meetings. All of the emails that staff had received were forwarded to them, so there was a trove of information and materials.
In addition to dropping the whole plans for both on the website, there's a significant obligation for advertising the changes. And so we're planning for each of the 2 plans to have a 2-page ad in the Gazette, which includes the existing land use map, the proposed land use map, maybe a transportation map, some of the maps, and then a textual description of a lot of the changes. So substantively, at least that piece will start to be available in the Gazette Around the time of, I forget the exact publication dates, but it'll be also be in May. So there'll be, again, 4 pages of the Goochland Gazette, 2 on the courthouse, 2 on Centerville.
As well as online?
But, and again, I don't know exactly how the timing comes. but
Okay.
This is for the public notice that, you know, the meeting's coming up
Right.
as to what are the changes, but we'll have the full plans online.
Yeah.
And
4 to 5 days before those public hearings.
Yeah.
We'll try to have them all up at the same
Great.
time.
Yeah.
Again, and we wanted to make sure their plans are at least out before the public hearing, the
Right.
community meeting, so that the timelines are about the same as when we have to advertise, actually. So they'll be running concurrently.
Overlapping.
Yeah, but you know, this is nothing like a 2-sentence,
No, I understand.
paragraph way our normal ad would
Yeah.
run. It's a.
We've been prepping for this for a while. It's
Yeah.
it's an expensive ad.
But trying to get, you know, some good information out to the public who aren't, they'll be referred to the website to get the full document, but to get a lot of good information out to the public.
Will this contrast the existing comp plan with this new one?
Yes, sir.
Because people have already bought into the comp plan and we use it on their monthly meetings. You know, you comply, you don't comply with the comp plan.
Right, and these are amendments to that comp plan. So yes, when I talk about 3 maps, what we've sort of sketched out right now is the existing comp plan for one of these areas and the proposed land use, the existing land use map from the, say, courthouse area, and also a map of the proposed land use in this comp plan, both in that act, for both courthouse and then for Centerville, so that
We can
there's,
see what the
yes, because we have to advertise the change. That's what we are always required to advertise. How are you changing it?
And that's better than us trying to explain exactly every line parcel, because it's hard. It's not like we have good landmarks in some of them, as you were trying to figure out looking at the map. But the existing map is at least showing that we haven't expanded or where we have contracted boundaries. It's kind of important, especially we have a little bit different land use distinctions from what we currently have in the plan, so people understand this is where I was, this is who I am now, or what potential.
Well, when will the new comp plan come out? Is it coordinated with this, or will it be another year from now?
Well, really,
You
that's
amend your
something-
comp plan regularly, so it's not like we're gonna have a new 8.5 by 14. And you've already, that comp plan's already been amended at least twice or 3 times.
Yeah.
Right.
This document will be amended,
Let's do that.
the comp plan, but it's not gonna come out in a new bound version. Typically, you undertake a new bound version only,
It was 2015, was it?
Yeah, the original adoption.
Maybe like a 10-year anniversary, we'll do the plan now. But we expect, just as you see this, we talked about.
As long as you
we showed there-
spearhead it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks. But we had the future area we showed in the Centerville map, the other area that took out a courthouse. We all know there's certain areas in the county that really need a focus as far as updating the land use plans, private transportation plans as well. So these are, as we finish this step, we'll be jumping into a bunch more and following the implementation steps. there.
Yeah.
Speed
Like
up.
immediately right after.
Right, SPEEDA will be starting right away. So the comp plan by the end of the next 2 years is going to be a completely different evaluation than it currently is now. But as we go along, we're going to probably have to look at sort of internal fixes in the existing comp plan to make sure things match as we go forward. And we'll have more discussions on what are the key elements we need to add in or whatever as we go forward.
to be fair though, having a little bit of a chaotic comp plan is a good thing because it means that it's a viable document that we've been paying attention to and we've been looking at, we've been improving as we go along. And not like waiting 5 years, pulling it out and go, "Oh, I don't want to face that, just, it's okay, you know. I mean,
Prior to
it's-
2015, nothing matched.
Yeah, so it's, you just, the fact that the major thoroughfare plan's a separate document and this will be a separate document, that's just a sign of the vitality of the plan. And yes, we will at some point hit the point where you go, I don't know if we can make heads or tails with this, we gotta fold it all into one document, but.
And, we've mentioned all these small spots when we first came to look at both the villages and, what would be next. Speed was next on our list. Really, once the idea of having like all the tough areas that are all, challenged by growth, the rest of the area of the county, for the most part, is that rural enhancement area. And that deserves the same attention because, we're getting pressures different types of pressures out there. And we're talking a lot in these plans about what that 85-15 is. We need to take some time, after we do this, that's also on our work plans.
Look at that 15.
Yeah, how do we preserve, that part of
The
it?
85.
At 85.
I just converted, look at that 85.
But you recognize that, that area is changing and we've got a lot of pressure coming out of our surrounding communities where there's development on the other side, on their sides of the border too.
Correct, and we continually see a lot of one-off development, and so it's how do we really foster that in the right place?
So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Look forward to coming back and showing you more as these things go.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Bill.
Planning Commission meeting adjourned for the night.
All right.